Hi, I'm Dolan. I'm the guitarist and vocalist in Notora. We are an art rock band from the UK, and since we're still in a national lockdown, we thought it'd be fun if each of us could film a rig rundown. As a band and individually, we spent years crafting and sculpting our sound. With us being a three-piece, we've got a lot of space to fill, so that plays a part in it too. But we're all quite passionate about sound and music gear and creating strange sounds and making soundscapes, so we thought this would be a perfect opportunity to share that side of us with you. Starting with guitars, this is my 2017 American Special Stratocaster. This was a complete impulse buy. I saw it hanging in the shop, asked to try it, instantly fell in love with it and had to buy it there and then, and has since become my number one. This guitar works really well live. It has Texas Special pickups, which are quite hot pickups, still quite dynamic, but I think that's why it sits so well in a live situation, because they're quite raunchy pickups. On traditional Strats, the first tone works for the neck pickup and the second tone works for the middle pickup, but on this Strat, the second tone actually works for the bridge pickup, which is great because Strat bridge pickups are particularly spiky. They're quite harsh sounding at times, so you can tame that using this, which works really well for sort of distorted guitar sounds. I use it quite a lot when I record because it can just take the edge off. I tend to just stick to the bridge and the neck pickup when I play live, so they do everything I need them to do. But when I play at home a lot, I will use the middle positions to play clean stuff. The middle pickup I think is quite underrated. I do use that sometimes for certain things, usually layering when we record songs. The guitar's pretty much stock from when I bought it. I haven't changed anything. The pickups are original, the tuners, all the wiring, the electrics inside. The only thing I did do was when I first got it set up, I did get the bridge clamped down. I don't really use whammy bars. I much prefer to have a hardtail style bridge. I prefer to have the tuning stability as opposed to having it floating and being able to do anything with the whammy bar. I don't play like that. It's better for me. I got it strung with the Diodario nickel wound 10 to 52 gauge, which is a light top heavy bottom set, and they work really well for me because they have the 12 gauge thicker strings and the 10 gauge lighter strings, so they take the harder playing style really well on the thicker strings for riffs and chords. And with the lighter strings being 10 gauge, you can still do all the nice noodly bendy stuff at the top without too much problem. I have this guitar tuned to E standard and I also drop D for some songs. My favourite thing about the guitar, honestly, is the neck. I find it the most comfortable neck I've ever played. It's a nice modern C shape. I find the satin neck on this guitar is just so comfortable to play. It's not like playing bare wood, but at the same time it's not heavily lacquered. It's somewhere in between. I just find it so comfortable. Overall, it's just an incredibly comfortable guitar to play. It sounds great, and that's why it's my go-to. This is my late 80s Squier Stratocaster. This one in particular is a Silver Series Strat, or often referred to as that, because of the silver Squier logo and the silver serial number, which has E10 in it, which indicates that it was made in Korea in 1986 or 87. These guitars are quite sought after because they are fairly inexpensive but really well made. Korea had never made guitars for Fender or Squier before, so it was a test to see how that would go, and it went really well apparently because this is a brilliant guitar. It's one of my favourites that I have. This is by far the oldest guitar that I have and the one I've had the longest too. It's not one I take out gigging, it's more of a keep at home or studio guitar. In fact, it's brilliant for the studio. I use it all the time for that. It just seems to sit so well in our recordings. This guitar is one I tend to keep at home because it has a lot of sentimental value to me. I got it from my dad and I absolutely love it and I'll never get rid of it. This guitar's had a lot of love over the years. It's been dinged and chipped and it's all yellowed here, but I love that. I have made a few changes to this guitar over the years. So these two pickups are stock, the bridge in the middle. The neck pickup I did change out for a gold lace sensor. I did change out the tuners for the vintage style Clusons. I just prefer those in general, plus the old ones were starting to slip and they were getting a bit old, so I made that change too. I've strung this guitar with the same strings as the other Strats, so the 10 to 52s by Diodario, the nickel wound ones. I have this guitar in E flat tuning, sometimes drop C sharp. I feel like you've got to have a Strat in E flat, it just seems to resonate in a completely different way. The pickup select is actually backwards, I don't know why, but it's one of those things. I'm quite sentimental with it, so I just kept it how I found it and I've just got used to it being like that. One thing that's unique to these era of guitars are these black roller string trees, which I've only ever seen on guitars made in Korea and Japan from the late 80s. Like the other Strat, I did want the bridge flush to the body. During lockdown I couldn't go and get it clamped like the other ones, so what I did do was buy more springs and just put 5 springs in the back. which might seem like overkill, but it seems to do the job fine. This bridge isn't moving, so that helps it stay stable. Again, like the other guitar, one of the most interesting features about this is the neck. This one is particularly slim. I don't think I've ever played a Strat neck this slim before. I would say it's almost a D shape, which is quite uncommon for a Strat, but everyone that's ever played this guitar has straight away just said, this neck feels like almost like an Ibanez neck. It's crazy, it's so slim, but I find it really comfortable. But yeah, it's a great studio guitar, sounds wonderful, and at this point it's like an extension of myself. This is my 2013 Squier Classic 5 Telecaster. In my opinion, this series is one of the best value for money guitars you can buy. They're absolutely solid. Before buying this guitar in 2015, I was not a telly guy whatsoever. I was all about the Strat. I just couldn't buy the tellies at all. And this came up on Facebook Marketplace and it was such a good price, I just had to go and check it out. So we drove there, I picked it up and instantly connected with it, and it completely changed my mind. It took me a while to adapt to it because I feel like you do have to learn to play the telly very differently. But the initial inspiration I got from picking it up made me want to do that. I absolutely love this guitar. This has been one of my main gigging guitars for years, especially for an alternate tuning. I have this guitar currently in D standard and drop C sometimes when we really want to get heavy. I have this strung with 11 to 56 D'Addario nickel wounds, or the NYXLs if I want to feel bougie. This is another light top heavy bottom set, which works really well for the riffing with the thicker strings and the bending and the noodly stuff with the thinner strings. But I really like the tension of this particular gauge for this tuning, especially with the thicker strings. When it's down to drop C, I need it to have quite a high tension, otherwise it'll keep going sharp when I'm digging in. This guitar is all stock apart from the neck pickup, which I had made for me by House of Tone Pickups in Chester. I asked to make a neck pickup which has more of a Strat vibe, so it's basically just a Telecaster neck pickup with the top of the chrome cut out so that the magnets are exposed, which means that picks up more of the high end. And, no, it really works for me. It's perfect. I absolutely highly recommend going to them. I've noticed making this video that I seem to have a big preference towards necks on guitars, and this one again has a really comfortable neck. This is quite high gloss. I'm thinking about maybe trying to sand off some of the gloss at some point, but it's a bit sticky, but the actual neck, the feeling of it is really comfortable. It's a nice C shape. This guitar is very versatile. I do tend to keep it in a lower tuning, but it works so well for live and in the studio. I'm guessing by now you've noticed I'm a fan of Fenders. They feel like home to me at this point. I find the necks and the body shapes to be really comfortable, but primarily it's the single coil pickups that they make that I just can't get enough of. They lend themselves so well to my style of playing because they're so dynamic. If you're playing softly, they will clean up really nicely, but if you dig in, they really start to bark. They're very reactive to your playing, and I love that. But with all that said, this is my most recent purchase. It is a 2020 Fender PS Series Telecaster with 2 humbuckers. I found with the styles I've been playing for the past year and the stuff I've been writing, having a humbucker guitar would be quite beneficial to have in the collection. For quite a while I've been after a humbucker guitar that would suit my needs. And this one has a coil split when you pull the tone pot out, which is perfect because that's what I wanted. I wanted something that would be able to do the humbucker thing, but also the single coil thing. And these particular humbuckers are Alnico 2, they're quite low output, so they're quite dynamic anyway. They're not typical of a lot of humbuckers that you would hear, and it really works for me. This guitar is almost completely stock to how I got it out of the box, apart from the scratch plate, which I swapped to a black from a all-white one. It looked cool, but I thought this looked better. I currently have it strung 10 to 52 like the Strats are in E standard tuning, and I sometimes drop it to D. I'm not really sure where I want to go with it yet, whether I want to do it as a low tuning guitar like the other Tally, but I'm just experimenting with it at the moment. It's really fun having it because it's very different to the others and I'm really enjoying it so far. Again, the neck on this guitar is lovely. It's a nice C shape, satin finish. I'm not too sure yet where this guitar is going to sit in terms of whether I'm going to be using it live or in the studio. I'm still experimenting with it, but so far I'm really enjoying it. So that was all the guitars. I thought it was also worth mentioning that I do have our bassist Sam's jazz bass here, which is a Japanese Fender Marcus Miller signature jazz bass. It is an active bass, and here it has a switch so you can switch between passive and active, which is really useful. I actually personally like it on the passive setting. He has left it here for quite a while now. I find it incredibly useful to have a bass around when I'm recording or making demos or sending sound ideas. But it's a nice maple neck with block inlays, got a really comfortable neck on it. It's got the volume and also got some active EQ here. It does usually have the pickup cover on it, or it comes like that. I don't get why they come on it, because that's exactly where my finger wants to go. But Sam uses it a lot live and in the studio. It's very versatile, as a jazz bass should be. I do find myself playing it quite often. I do really enjoy his bass. Hopefully when lockdown ends, he doesn't take it home with him, because I want to keep it here. So now on to amps. I do run a stereo rig when I play live. On one side I have a Vox AC30 C2 with greenbacks in it. I don't currently have that at home, but I will show a picture of it on the screen any second. And on the other side I have this Hayden Mofo 30. Hayden were a sister company to Ashdown, who are obviously a very famous bass amp manufacturer, but Hayden are no longer going, unfortunately. But this was the second series of Mofo they did. The first one looked a little bit different. I do really like this amp. It is like a hot-rodded AC30. It's got more low end and more gain on tap, and it's a lovely little one-channel amp, EL84 driven, like a Vox would be. I'll show you the front panel. I run it fairly clean, so the gain's set to 12 o'clock, runs quite clean. The Mofo knob is like an inbuilt boost, which I have slightly up. But generally when you plug a single cord guitar into that, it's pretty clean, but when you dig in, it just starts to break up slightly. And it has a really useful built-in attenuator, which you can switch it down to 2 watts, which is great for home playing, so you can really drive the valves without blowing your head off. It has a UK and US input, which is slightly differently voiced. I prefer the UK input personally, and I have that running into 2 1x12 cabs. Overall, brilliant amp, plenty loud enough at 30 watts. This amp is a great studio tool. It records so well. I've had this amp now for about 7 years and never changed the valves in it, so that's due very soon. It's not sounding too healthy at the moment, so I'll get that done as soon as I can. But I've gigged it heavily for that whole time. It's been used in rehearsals, gigs, the studio, and it's still going. I'm quite surprised actually, considering, like I said, the valves have never been changed in it, but yeah, it's a brilliant tool to have. So this is my ever-growing pedal board. I know it looks a bit overkill, but every single pedal on here does get used quite frequently, especially in the live set. They all have their uses. Let's start with this Boss ES8 at the bottom here, the big one. So this is kind of like the heart of the operation. Every single pedal, apart from the tuner at the bottom right, and the big blue pedal, the Strymon Blue Sky here, runs through this pedal, and I use it to pre-program which pedals I want on when, so for which songs, which part of the songs. It really helps with bulk changing different pedals, because I do that a lot. And before I had this, I would have to essentially tap dance and try and switch 3 pedals off and another 2 on at the same time, whilst also trying to sing and play guitar. I think since having this, I don't think I can go back now. It's just so convenient, it makes my job a lot easier. And it just gives me more room to perform, as opposed to constantly having to look down and try and figure out what I'm doing with my feet. But yeah, so that is the heart of the operation. But the actual signal chain starts off with, well, after the tuner, which I love the poly tune. I think the display on it's great. Starts off with the Ibanez Tube Screamer here, which is an overdrive. I run that with this boost here to stack up the gains on my amp. So I run my amps quite clean, and then I just punch these on whenever I want to intensify it, so push the front end of the amp. So it starts off with the Ibanez Tube Screamer, into the mini fuzz face, into this boost, which is great. I kind of go between having the amp clean and having the boost on, which this takes it into a kind of mild crunch, and then I'll use the Tube Screamer to push it further into overdrive, and that's what I'll use for solos or for sort of the heavier parts. After that, it goes into this here, which is one of the pogs I have, and I have this set to an octave down, and then it goes into this pog here, which is set to an octave up for that kind of organ sound. Then it goes into this EQ, which I've set up to be like a radio filter. I like to use it for like the start of songs with riffs, so it has this really thin sounded riff, and then as soon as I kick it off, the riff suddenly sounds much fatter and more intense. And then I go into this delay here, which is set mono, so this goes into both amps at the same time. There's no ping pong between them, and that's a faster, like a dotted eighth delay, kind of like Edge style. And then it goes into this delay, the second one, which is set up in stereo, so this ping pongs between the amps, and this is set to a slower, like fourth note feel with a bit of modded delay sounds to it, so it's got a bit of chorus on it. And this is my most recent pedal I got as a gift for my birthday. This is set to go first in the chain actually. I don't have it set up to be able to switch it. I've got it into the volume input. But this thing's mental. I'm still learning how to use it. It's a synth pedal and it's just crazy. I've experimented plugging a expression pedal into it as well, so I can like do some mad sweeps, but there we go, I'm still there learning how to use it. I feel like this spot on my pedal board sort of the interchangeable spot, so I'll probably just experiment with what's to go there, but at the moment I'm having fun with that. After going through the entire signal chain, it comes out stereo of the ES8 into the Strymon Blue Sky, which is one of my favourite pedals. You can just go crazy long reverbs with this. They sound amazing as well. And then I take the stereo output of the Blue Sky into each amp, and that's pretty much how it's all run. Oh, it's worth noting actually, the reason why I've put the boost after the fuzz face is because the fuzz face has actually got a very low signal. As soon as I kick it on, it goes very quiet, so the boost being after it actually helps bring that up to a decent volume. But no, I'm really happy with it so far. I don't really feel like I need to change anything as of yet, but I'm not going to promise anything. As anybody with pedal boards know, it's going to constantly change as your tastes do. And lastly, I thought I'd show you some of my home recording setup, since as a band we like to do a lot of demos and pre-production before we record our songs. So this is my MacBook Pro from mid-2012. It's a 13-inch. I run Logic 10 on that. It works fine. It's showing its age a bit, but it's doing pretty well. And then my interface is the M Audio 2x2M. The M track, again, it's pretty standard. It does have a bit of lag sometimes. I'm looking to upgrade that eventually to a Universal Audio Apollo or something like that, but it's got phantom power and two inputs, so that's absolutely fine, does the job. And these monitors are the Alesis Elevate 5s. Again, pretty standard, but a nice flat response. I've got used to them by now, like the way they sound, so they're fine for me with mixing. They've got a nice bass boost feature on the back for casual listening, which is great. My headphones, which I also use for a bit of mixing, are the Beyerdynamic DT770 Pros. I find them to be really good for that detailing work. They're quite natural in their sound. They're not too bassy, but they're very detailed and they're quite useful for that. My main home recording mic is the Rode NT1A. Again, pretty standard, but it works really well for vocals, acoustic guitar, and even on electric amp cabs as well. I think they sound great, especially paired with a dynamic like a 57 or something like that. It's worth noting as well, for live use, I do use a Shure SM58 Beta, which is just my go-to mic. I'm not sure whether you see Beta or Beta, but either way, it's a brilliant mic. This is my most recent purchase for the little recording setup. I absolutely love this. I've always been a bit of a traditionalist when it comes to amps and playing guitar like that, because I tend to always go for valve amps going through cabs, you know, like actually moving the air in the room. I've never really been into the whole digital modelling, but this is a really good halfway house for that, because it's a way of sending your actual amp head or amp into this, which is basically a cabinet emulator. I mean, it does quite a few things. It also is an attenuator, but mainly it has really good cab simulation inside of it. So you run your amp head into this, which has a load of different cabs inside, different mics. You can position them. It has a nice reverb and EQ, and you can even add a stereo spreader to make it sound like you're playing in stereo. But this has been really good, because it's just a great way of recording really good amp tones at home without having to mic everything up. I don't have an amazingly acoustically treated room here, so this is a godsend for that. But I'm thinking about maybe utilising this for live use too eventually, because you can plug your amp head into it, send it into your cab, but also send an XLR out to the sound guy, who can just then get a really clean capture of your amp going through a cab sim, and don't have to worry about any mic bleed or anything like that live. So this is a great piece of kit. I'm really glad I got it. That pretty much sums up my little home recording setup. Well, this has been a rundown of my personal rig. Really hope you've enjoyed it. If you did, please like and subscribe to our channel. Let us know what you thought by leaving a comment below, and please check out our social media and our music. All links will be down below in the description. Stay safe and take it easy.